Is this 2,000-year-old lump of corroded metal the world's oldest analog computer?
There are over 30 gears inside, and some of the gears have up to 65 teeth on them.
Could this World War II bomb really have been piloted by pigeons?
If you were worried about pigeons going to the bathroom on your car, now you've got a pigeon piloting a 1,000-pound bomb.
And how can this ancient Roman cup change color?
It's not an optical illusion. It really does change color from red to green.
These are the most remarkable and mysterious objects on Earth. Hidden away in museums, laboratories, and storage rooms. Now, new research and technology can get under their skin like never before. We can rebuild them, pull them apart, and zoom in to reveal the unbelievable, the ancient, and the truly bizarre. These are the world's strangest things. In a museum in Athens sits a misshapen lump of corroded metal. In all of archaeological history, no other object like it has ever been found. It has blown our ideas of the ancient world clean out of the water, and it's still doing it today.
It's an utterly extraordinary object. There is nothing remotely like this that is that old.
Now, using cutting-edge imaging technology, it's been restored to its original state. This is the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old machine just 13 inches tall. Inside is an astonishing network of interconnected cogs and dials.
The level of precision of all the different gears and the mechanisms, it's incredible. It's almost stultifying.
This is technology for understanding the heavens that's over 1,000 years ahead of its time.
It's a portable cosmos.
For 100 years, archaeologists have been grappling with its secrets. Now, new research can finally reveal them. Who made it? Where does it come from? How does it work? And what exactly is it? The mystery begins over 100 years ago, 40 miles off the southern tip of Greece.
It's 1900, and we're in the island of Antikythera. There are some sponge divers who take shelter in a cove, and they go diving and they discover bronzes and marbles, and they realize they've stumbled on an ancient wreck.
Using coins recovered from the seabed, archaeologists date the wreck to around 60 BCE. The incredible hoard of treasures they find hits the headlines. The small block of corroded metal barely makes a ripple.
So a local archaeologist is looking at the finds, and a little piece actually falls off, and he notices a cog inside. And that's unexpected.
But many archaeologists believe the presence of gears and cogs means this is a relatively modern object that's ended up on the wreck by accident.
Generally, when you find intricate metal objects like that, it could look like it had just fallen in there.
For 40 years, the metal curiosity is ignored. It can't be genuine. Or can it? In 1951, it catches the eye of a scholar from Cambridge University.
Derek de Sola Price, a physicist, begins to study this mechanism, and he realizes that actually this is an advanced clockwork mechanism.
Based on a detailed study and the presence of some ancient Greek letters, Price makes a radical claim. This is not modern. It really is 2,000 years old. It's an extraordinary theory.
It's almost inconceivable that this kind of object could have been made in the ancient world.
Price analyzes other fragments and further faint characters that are barely visible. And he makes an even more astonishing claim. It's a celestial computer.
When he suggested this, it was considered outrageous. Nothing like this was known or thought to be possible from that period of history.
20 years later, Price destroys any remaining doubts. He uses a combination of X-rays and gamma rays to peer through millennia of corrosion. What he finds is even more astonishing than his most outlandish suggestions.
He can see that there are over 30 gears inside. Some of these are made of flat sheet bronze, and some of the gears have up to 65 teeth on them. The complexity of that was unexpected.
And in the last few years, our understanding of the Antikythera mechanism has been transformed by new research. Experts ship in a cutting-edge 3D X-ray tomographic scanner with a resolution far beyond anything Price has in the 1970s.
Tomography basically means you take a series of slices that you can see through the device so that you can see buried structures.
And it turns out that Price barely scratched the surface.
We now know that there are 37 or 38 of these gears involved in making the movements of this device.
The scans reveal a machine vastly more complex than Price imagined. And in the last decade, computerized image analysis of these scans has resolved buried writing that hasn't been seen by a human eye for 2,000 years.
The inscriptions not only fill in missing pieces that don't survive, but they also give us a much greater idea of how this was used.
Experts are even able to read parts of an instruction manual that explain what the mechanism is. Price has been right all along.
What this device is basically designed to do is to show you the positions of the celestial bodies. So that's the 5 planets, the Sun and the Moon at any point in the year. 5 planets because that was all that were known at the time. So it was Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn.
This is what experts now believe the Antikythera mechanism originally looked like. It can predict the positions of the Sun, Moon, and planets years into the future. No other clockwork celestial calendar will appear until 1348, 1,400 years later. And that one is like a toy in comparison. Because this isn't just the world's first known analog computer. It's also extraordinarily accurate. How did its creator build in such astonishing precision using technology we didn't even know existed 2,000 years ago? How does this 2,000-year-old device accurately predict the movements of our solar system? It was originally housed in a wooden case about the size of a shallow shoebox. The mechanism inside is driven by complicated combinations of gear sets, including a spur gear designed to turn the rotary system 90 degrees. Technology that isn't seen again until the Middle Ages, 1,400 years later.
On the front there's a dial that shows the 365 days of the year, and if you turn the handle of the device, the pointers that represent the different celestial bodies, the planets and so forth, move around to show you where they would be in the sky at any day during the year. But also throughout different years, because the outer planets take much longer than a year to complete their orbit.
There are separate pointers for the Sun, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, and the Moon. Each dial and clock face serves a unique purpose, such as counting down to athletic games like the Olympics, or indicating which sign of the zodiac the Sun is in. while tables record annual events like the summer and winter solstices.
It captures with great accuracy throughout the entire year, the fine details of for example, the trajectory of the moon.
The tomographic scans reveal that the moon pointer has a tiny rotating moon on its end. Experts believe it was painted half white and half black.
You see the little ball that represented the moon rotates so that you can see the different phases of the moon.
Experts also notice that the speed of the moon pointer changes as it turns. But it's not a mistake. It's genius.
If you go outside and measure the moon as it passes through the sky, it seems to speed up and slow down. This is because the moon is going around the Earth, not in a circular orbit, but in what we call an ellipse, a squashed circle. So when the moon is closer to the Earth, it seems to speed up, and when the moon is further away from the Earth, it seems to slow down.
It's an incredibly difficult thing to realize with circular gears, but there's a mechanism for doing that.
The changing speed of the moon pointer works using two gears slightly out of alignment with each other. The drive gear has a peg that fits in a slot on the moon gear. As it goes around, it's fastest when the peg is at either end of the slot, but slows down as the peg slides along the slot.
The kind of precision with which you had to make these gears was extraordinary.
Research in the last 15 years reveals that the Antikythera mechanism can even predict solar eclipses.
The mechanism isn't just extraordinary because it's complex, but it condenses all the knowledge of Greek astronomy into one very small, convenient box. It is quite breathtaking.
It's the universe in a box.
No other machine like this will appear for another 1,400 years. Its inventor must be a genius. So who is it?
One of the first people that one might think of from this period is Archimedes. Archimedes was not just someone who was incredibly knowledgeable about how the world worked and about the physics of the heavens. He was also an inventor.
Archimedes creates large war machines with levers and pulleys. He designs intricate devices such as the world's first odometer, a portable machine for measuring distance, and the Archimedes screw, a water pump still used across the world today.
He was really the first port of call when people thought, who could have invented this incredible object? Who could have encapsulated so many different aspects of Greek science into one thing, into one place?
So, is this another of Archimedes' inventions? There's one problem with this theory. The creator of the Antikythera mechanism knows that the moon's speed seems to vary.
The first person we know of that was aware of the apparent speeding up and slowing down of the moon was Hipparchus of Nicaea, around 170 BC.
By that time, Archimedes has been dead for more than 40 years. So if not the great Archimedes, who else? Inscriptions on one of the dials provide a tantalizing clue.
One set of dials tells about the Olympic Games, which we all might expect, but also lesser known, really more locally based festivals like the Halaya.
The Halaya are regional games that only take place on the island of Rhodes.
It's thought that this might be a special calling card, as if to say, made in Rhodes, because it's a very localized game. And Rhodes had a long-standing tradition of metalworking, most famously the Colossus of Rhodes, which was a massive bronze statue that framed the entrance to the harbor.
So if the mechanism came from Rhodes, did its creator as well? A prime candidate is the man who discovers the changing speed of the moon, Hipparchus.
Hipparchus lived and worked around the right time, about 170 BC, and in the right place. He worked in Rhodes, and it's thought to be likely that that's where this device came from.
It could be Hipparchus, but he dies 60 years before the Antikythera ship sinks, meaning the mechanism would be very old already when it's lost. And there is one other candidate. He also lived in Rhodes and at exactly the right time. The astronomer Posidonius.
One very enticing reason why it's thought that he might have had something to do with this device is that at one stage he was visited by the Roman writer Cicero, who wrote about it in his diary, and Cicero said that this man Posidonius told him about a device that he'd made to represent the motions of the planets.
Archimedes, Hipparchus, or Posidonius. We may never know for sure. Whoever makes it is clearly a genius, because he envisions the universe as a clockwork mechanism.
It suggests a kind of thinking that really we don't get familiar with until the age of Newton, the mechanical age, the idea that you can think about the universe as a kind of clockwork system, as a mechanical device. Clearly someone at that time in ancient Greece already was thinking that perhaps nature works that way.
If not for a group of sponge divers 100 years ago, the secrets of this strange thing might have remained lost at the bottom of the Aegean forever. At the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C., is the nose cone of a World War II bomb. But this is no ordinary bomb. On the front are tiny windows for its tiny pilots.
The aim of this technology was to guide a 1,000-pound bomb with a pigeon.
Now, using state-of-the-art digital imaging, we can reveal it in all its glory. This is the pigeon bomb.
In some ways, it might be one of the smarter bombs that we've ever invented.
Measuring 25 inches long and 23 inches wide, it's just large enough to carry 3 tiny kamikaze pilots. Could this bizarre contraption really work? Who came up with it? And why on earth does anyone need a pigeon-guided bomb in the first place? This is a bomb, designed to be flown by a pigeon. Why would anyone do that?
Most of the history of modern aerial bombing has been a history of bombs missing their targets. And now, if you're thinking about naval bombing, it becomes an even dicier proposition because you're trying to drop a large piece of metal, unguided, onto a moving object that is going to be pretty small relative to where you are.
It's estimated that during World War II, as few as 1% of bombs dropped on ships hit their targets. The need for more accurate bombing strategies becomes top priority.
There's a couple of different possible solutions. One is use torpedoes. Drop torpedoes from planes, because torpedoes are actually meant to hit ships. Another is use a guidance system of some sort, something to make these dumb bombs at least a little bit smarter.
As an alternative to simply dropping a bomb and hoping it would plummet to its target, both sides developed glide bombs.
The intent of the glide bomb is that there's enough control, so as opposed to just doing a free fall, you can do some adjustments and increase the probability that you're going to hit your target.
The Germans have some success with the first glide bomb, the Fritz X. However, the Fritz X has a weakness. It's radio controlled. And this creates two potential problems. Number one, you have to keep the plane that launched it flying at the same time so it can steer it, and that puts the plane and its crew in danger. And two, as a radio-guided bomb, the radio signal can be jammed, and later on in the war, the Allies were able to jam that signal quite successfully.
The perfect glide bomb would not only need to be unjammable, it would also need to be autonomous, able to guide itself to a target without the need for external control.
So how do you create a guided bomb without radio guidance? Well, you want to put the guidance package inside the bomb itself and make something that's not dependent upon a radio signal. Hence the pigeon bomb.
But of all the animals in the world, why pigeons?
Pigeons have been useful to us for sending messages for centuries because they have this incredible ability to navigate, in particular to home, to navigate back from where they were sent out from. And so they've been used for this purpose for millennia. The ancient Egyptians used them, the ancient Greeks used them. In fact, one of the messages the Greeks trusted to pigeons was the results of the Olympics.
The use of pigeons in warfare really came into its own in the modern age. In World War I, 500,000 pigeons were used to send messages back and forth. And one pigeon even became a hero. This was a pigeon that served the French and was named Cher Ami, and it delivered its message despite the fact that it lost an eye and was severely wounded in the process. It was actually given a military commendation for its heroic service in wartime. Pigeons also saw very important uses in the Second World War. The Allies dropped homing pigeons with requests for information over German-occupied territory, and the pigeons had little cards on them that resistance fighters could use, fill out the information, put it back in the pigeon, and then the pigeon, of course, would fly straight home.
And there is one other pigeon characteristic that would be essential to becoming a bomb guidance system.
Birds generally are actually a lot smarter in many ways than they're given credit for. You know, this notion of bird brain is really unfair, but even among birds, pigeons are among the smartest. Pigeons are very good, it seems, at learning a task.
So pigeon pilots do make a strange sort of sense. But that still leaves one big question. How on earth do you teach them to fly this bomb? The pigeon bomb, one of the strangest inventions in the history of warfare. Who could have come up with such a bizarre idea? Enter pigeon fancier B.F. Skinner.
B.F. Skinner is one of the fathers of modern psychology, and he's particularly famous for developing various methods of what we now call behavior psychology, really trying to understand the basic impulses by which thinking creatures operate, how they respond to stimuli.
This idea that you can get a response according to some particular stimulus, that goes back at least to the experiments that Pavlov did, famously with dogs. He found that, dogs would start to salivate if they were shown food.
Pavlov was much more interested in very, very simple responses to stimuli and physical responses, whereas Skinner's taking it a bit farther. He's actually trying to, in some ways, control the way you respond consciously to various signals.
Skinner devised this apparatus. It was really just a box. It's often now called a Skinner box. So the animal is put inside it, and then given a particular stimulus, and once it happens to make the response you're after, then the animal gets a reward, food, for example. And quite quickly, relatively intelligent creatures like pigeons will figure out what it is that's being expected of them. They will remember the behavior that created the reward, and they'll do it again and again and again.
In initial tests, the pigeons respond even better than expected.
Skinner found that you could actually train pigeons to do some pretty complicated things that certainly you'd never find birds doing normally. So, for example, he trained them to play ping pong.
Encouraged by the results of his pigeon training experiments, Skinner goes to the government seeking money to develop his pigeon bomb.
B.F. Skinner comes to the U.S. military with what on the surface would seem like an utterly absurd idea. But you have to understand that World War II is a time of great experimentation, and it is hardly the craziest idea that is tried out. Amongst those crazy ideas are bats carrying napalm, and my personal favorite, which was the Soviet-trained dogs carrying anti-tank bombs. They were trained to climb underneath the German tanks to set off their bombs. Just one tiny miscalculation, they were trained on Russian tanks. So as soon as these dogs were let loose, the first thing they did with their bombs was dive right under the Russian tanks. So not going as according to plan with the whole bomb dog thing.
Using animals as bomb delivery systems clearly has a poor track record. But B.F. Skinner is convinced his pigeon bomb concept is, well, bomb-proof. But how would it actually work?
The idea was to take a glide bomb and at the front had a pressure-sealed nose cone where the pigeon could actually be mounted.
There's a little screen in front of the pigeon onto which an image of their target is being projected. And the pigeon is trained to peck at the image, and then the steering system responds to the pigeon's movements and aims the bomb at the target.
To minimize the chance of one pigeon guiding the bomb off course, each bomb would carry 3 pigeon pilots.
The 3 pigeons would actually operate so that the majority vote would always end up controlling the trajectory of the glide bomb.
Understandably, the idea of putting a high-explosive bomb under the control of 3 pigeons does not initially go down well with the U.S. military. But Skinner is adamant it can work.
So in 1943, Skinner receives $25,000 to explore his idea, which was a princely sum at the time.
Skinner is given basic details of the glide bomb. It's known as a Pelican. His experiment is given the perfect code name, Project Pigeon. Having settled on the idea of projecting the image from a lens onto a tilting screen that could sense where the bird was pecking, Skinner begins testing them on realistic images. And the results are startling.
When someone describes the pigeon bomb to you, it just sounds ludicrous. But when you see footage of these pigeons pecking at the image of the ship projected onto the screen in front of you, you see that, no, this is actually working.
But as far as we know, the pigeon bomb never takes flight. So what goes wrong? This is a bomb, piloted by pigeons. Its creator, B.F. Skinner, is convinced it's a viable weapon in the war against the Nazis.
In 1944, Skinner turns up to demonstrate his solution to a team of scientists. And he's ready to go. He's got the film, he's got his little pigeon pilots, he's got the mock-up of the capsule, and it works. He has solved the problem. He has created an unjammable guidance system, assuming no one has breadcrumbs handy.
But convincing the skeptical scientists proves impossible.
In fact, the meeting ended by someone pulling Skinner aside and suggesting to him that he just go out and get drunk, which he interpreted accurately as a very bad sign.
Unknown to Skinner, while he's busy training pigeons, a rival project is developing an alternative solution to the problem.
Skinner's solution works. He has the guidance system all set up. The problem is by the time he's perfected it, the other solution that was being explored, the radar guidance system, has also advanced considerably, and that's the one that the military goes with. And they end up making 2,600 of these bombs, which are known as the bat bombs. And you can say this about the radar guided system, there's a lot less cleanup afterwards.
The pigeon bomb never takes flight. And despite all that training, its brave, feathered pilots are never given the chance to prove they have the right stuff. It's tough being a war pigeon. In the depths of the British Museum in London is one of the strangest Roman artifacts ever discovered. At first glance, this 1,700-year-old cup looks decorative, but otherwise unremarkable. Now, carefully reconstructing it with the latest digital imaging technology reveals its secrets. Standing roughly 6.5 inches tall, this is a Lycurgus cup. It's an ancient relic with a mystifying party trick. It changes color.
This is such an incredible artifact. It's not an optical illusion. It really does change color from red to green as you move it around in the light.
How does it work? How was it made? And what exactly is it?
The Lycurgus cup is a cup from about 1,700 years ago, from around 300 AD, so late Roman period, a time when glass technologies have been fairly well developed at this point and getting more complex.
Mythical figures seem to float above the inner glass chalice. Archaeologists call this a cage cup.
In fact, it's the most well-preserved cage cup in the ancient world. Even in the Roman days, in the 4th century, when this cup was actually made and used, this would have been a rare piece.
Microscopic examination shows the cup and its floating cage are made from a single piece of glass.
Glass is a really brittle and breakable material, so the delicacy involved is quite incredible. They would have used tiny tools to file away very carefully the areas of glass that they didn't want. And they actually undercut the design so that there's areas under the person where there's air gaps and just little legs that attach it to the cup. The terrifying thing about this is one slip up or one sneeze from the person that was doing this would have meant melting the whole thing down and starting again from scratch.
But it's the glass itself that is truly spectacular.
What's remarkable about this glass is the fact that it changes colors, and that I've never seen outside of this cup.
If you look at the cup just under normal light, then the cup appears green. But if you put the cup in front of the light that's shining through it appears red.
No one would have really seen these things, even in the Roman days, a cup changing color. It would have been an extremely rare piece. Most people would have just been completely amazed.
Possession of such a unique object would broadcast the owner's status.
This is the kind of piece you really want to show off. Here you are, you've built your fancy house, you have your fancy parties, but finally the sort of center showpiece would be this cup.
It's known as dichroic glass, which means two-colored. For centuries, its secrets remained a mystery. Studying the cup under a normal microscope reveals nothing. It appears to be like any other Roman glass. So how can a 1700-year-old cup change color? An ancient Roman cup with a color-changing party trick. For centuries, this unique ability defies explanation.
In 1990, scientists used an electron microscope to have a look at what was going on inside the glass itself.
They discover tiny particles of gold, silver, and copper suspended in the glass.
These are nanoparticles, so they're about 1,000th of the width of a human hair. It's these tiny metallic particles that hold the secret to the amazing colour-changing effects that we see in this glass. And it's all because of quantum effects, which happen down at the subatomic level.
The effect works because white light is not just one color.
White light is actually a mixture of all the colours of the rainbow: red, orange, green, blue, indigo, violet.
The smallest particles of light are called photons, and each color of light is caused by photons of a different energy. The magic happens when these photons enter the glass and hit the nanoparticles of metal.
Because they're metal particles, they've got like a cloud of electrons around the outside of them. And when the photon hits the cloud of electrons, it's absorbed, and it sets up a sort of vibration in the cloud of electrons. It's like a jumper hitting a trampoline. The whole thing flexes and a wave runs around it. And then when it flexes back out again, it spits out the photon back the way it came.
Scientists discover that the precise diameter of the nanoparticles in the glass causes only green photons to bounce back.
By very carefully varying the quantities of the ingredients when you're making this glass, you can make these particles exactly the right size to scatter the green light, allow the other colours through, and create this beautiful effect.
When you look at the light reflected by the cup, you see green.
The rest of the light goes right through the cup. And white light minus green is that kind of plummy red colour.
So when the light is shining through the glass, you see red.
What's incredible about this glass is that in order to produce these nanoparticles, the maker would have had to have ground up the metals into a really, really fine powder, much, much finer than talcum powder, for example, and then embedded that into the glass and dispersed it evenly, so it's evenly distributed throughout in a very, very specific amount.
The effect is caused by a minute amount of the metals.
We think that the amount of silver and gold in this cup is about 300 parts per million for the silver and about 40 parts per million for the gold. So if you were to clump all of that silver and gold together, it would still be a particle that is too small for the naked eye to see.
Scientists call the quantum effect that causes the color change surface plasmon resonance. This is nanotechnology, the manipulation of matter at an atomic or near atomic scale.
It's probably pretty safe to say that the Romans didn't understand the quantum effects of what was going on inside their glass, but clearly someone knew enough to know that if you added these metals in these quantities into this material, then you could create these amazing color-changing effects.
With its extraordinary quantum glass, the Lycurgus cup may well be the most spectacular cage cup ever created. Who is this unique object made for?
He would have been certainly a wealthy individual, a high-class individual, maybe even someone associated with the emperor or the emperor's family.
The cup is probably made in the early 4th century AD, when the Roman Empire is divided between two warring emperors, Constantine in Licinius. Crucially, Licinius is based in Thrace, in the Eastern Empire.
The cup shows the mythical king Lycurgus, who is a Thracian king, battling Dionysus, god of wine.
In the myth, Lycurgus of Thrace is defeated by Dionysus, also known as the Roman god Bacchus.
And it could be symbolic for Licinius, the Western Roman emperor who moved to Thrace. During this time, the Emperor Constantine, who was the ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire, did defeat Licinius, and this may be a kind of symbolism, if you will.
So it's possible the cup's decoration is symbolic of Licinius's defeat by Constantine. If it is made to celebrate his victory, Emperor Constantine may have drunk from this very cup. Whoever owned it, the survival of this extraordinarily fragile ancient wonder through 2,000 years of turmoil is nothing short of a miracle. Today, our understanding of the cup's unique color-changing ability is helping develop pioneering new technology.
Inspired by these beautiful, brightly coloured nanoparticles in the Lycurgus cup, scientists at the University of Illinois have been able to develop incredibly sensitive sensors. So in the Lycurgus cup, all of those little gold and silver nanoparticles are surrounded by glass. But if instead of glass, you put these nanoparticles into something like water, you can detect tiny changes in the concentration of different things dissolved in the water by looking for changes in the colour of the sensor. This means that this technology has applications from medicine, where you can detect tiny quantities of things in people's bodily fluids, to detecting explosives, where you can detect trace amounts of signature chemicals that give away the presence of a bomb.
It seems that sometimes discovering the secrets of the ancient world may unlock the secrets of our own future.